There's a specific kind of guilt that shows up when you open a closet and see the exercise equipment you haven't touched in 8 months. Or when you scroll past an app you paid for and never opened. Or when you find a kitchen gadget still in its box, 3 moves later, that you were genuinely excited about when you bought it. The guilt isn't just about the money. It's about something harder to name. It's the feeling that you bought a version of yourself that you never actually became. And here's the thing that nobody in personal finance really talks about. You weren't buying the item. You were buying the identity. The purchase was never really about the thing. Now, that reframe sounds simple, but it changes everything about why this keeps happening and what you can actually do about it. Because if the problem were just with impulse buying or just a failure to pause and think before spending, the solution would actually be quite easy. Wait 30 days. Sleep on it. Ask yourself if you really need it. And most people have heard all of that advice and followed none of it in any sustained way, because that advice is solving the wrong problem. The mechanism at work here has a name in psychology. It's called the end state fantasy. And once you understand it, a lot of your purchasing history starts to make a different kind of sense. The end state fantasy is what happens when you don't just see a product. You see the version of yourself who owns and uses that product. You don't see the yoga mat. You see yourself as someone who does yoga, calm, centered, flexible, healthy. You don't see the language learning app. You see yourself as someone who speaks French, curious, cultured, disciplined enough to have learned something hard. You don't see the meal prep containers. You see yourself as someone who has their life organized enough to actually meal prep every Sunday. The purchase feels like the first step toward becoming that person. And in the moment, it really does feel that way. The gap between who you are right now and who you imagine you could be starts to close the moment you add it to your cart. This is not irrationality. This is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, which is simulating future states and motivating action toward them. The problem is that the purchase itself produces a feeling of resolution. The moment you buy the thing, you've made a commitment to the identity. Your brain registers that, and the felt urgency drops. The yoga mat arrives, and the acute desire to become a yoga person, the specific discomfort that was driving the purchase, gets partially resolved just by owning it. Not by using it, by owning it. You are now, in some felt sense, a person who has yoga equipment. And so, the urgency to actually do yoga fades. There's a related concept in behavioral economics called anticipated utility versus experienced utility. Anticipated utility is how good you think something is going to feel. Experienced utility is how good it actually feels when you have it, and researchers have consistently found a significant gap between the two. We are reliably, systematically bad at predicting how much ongoing satisfaction we'll actually get from things we buy. We imagine future use, and it feels vivid and real. We imagine ourselves making the salads, doing the workouts, speaking the French. That imagined future is emotionally compelling, but the imagination itself delivers much of the emotional payoff. The actual experience of ownership rarely matches it. Now, here's the thing that standard financial advice completely misses about this. The usual response is to call this impulse buying and prescribe a cooling off period. The 30-day rule, the wait before you buy rule, the do you really need it question. And for some purchases, those interventions work fine. But they don't address identity purchasing, because identity purchasing doesn't feel impulsive. It feels considered. You've thought about getting a yoga mat for months. You've researched the best ones. You've read the reviews. You didn't impulse buy it. You made a deliberate, considered purchase that still resulted in an unused item sitting in your closet. The cooling off period was already built into your deliberation. It just didn't help because the deliberation itself was feeding the end state fantasy rather than interrogating it. The 30-day rule asks, do you still want this? The more useful question is, do you actually want to do this? Or do you want to be the kind of person who does this? Those are not the same question. And most purchases fail the second question even when they pass the first. Let's be honest about something else too. The consumer economy is deliberately engineered around this psychology. The most successful product marketing doesn't sell you the product. It sells you the identity that comes with the product. The person wearing the running shoes isn't just wearing running shoes. They're athletic, disciplined. The person with the premium coffee subscription isn't just drinking coffee. They have taste. They appreciate quality. They're the kind of person who doesn't compromise. Every major brand has figured out that the most effective marketing bypasses the rational product evaluation and speaks directly to who you want to be. They're not exploiting a random weakness. They're leveraging a very specific cognitive pattern that all humans have, and they've spent billions of dollars getting good at triggering it. So what do you actually do with this? The first shift is replacing the end-state fantasy with what I'd call a process question. Before you buy something, instead of imagining yourself having the thing or being the person who uses it, get specific about the actual process. The yoga mat question isn't, do I see myself being a yoga person? It's, am I actually going to drive to a studio or roll out a mat in my living room at 7 in the morning 3 times a week? Not the identity, the process, the alarm going off, the actual physical action, the Tuesday when you're tired and it's raining and you have to decide whether to do it, because that Tuesday is the real test. And your honest answer to whether you'll show up on that Tuesday is far more predictive of whether a purchase will be used than how excited you feel about it right now. This isn't about pessimism, it's about accuracy. The process question is how you find out whether you're buying an identity or a tool. Tools get used because they fit into a process you're actually willing to do. Identity purchases collect dust because they're trying to shortcut a process you haven't actually committed to. The second shift is getting honest about what you're actually trying to buy. Because behind most identity purchases, there's a real need that the purchase is trying to address, just addressing it in the wrong way. The yoga mat might be trying to buy stress relief, or a sense of physical well-being, or a feeling of having your life together. Those are real needs. And if you can name what you're actually after, you can ask whether this purchase is really the best way to meet it. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the honest answer is that a 20-minute walk you'd actually take addresses the need better than the yoga studio membership you won't use. The third is thinking about identity purchases as information rather than solutions. Every time you feel strongly pulled towards something, every time you build an end-state fantasy around a product, that feeling is telling you something real about what you want your life to look like. It's pointing at a real gap between who you are and who you want to be. That gap is worth taking seriously. But the right response to the gap usually isn't the purchase. It's an honest conversation with yourself about whether you want to actually close the gap or just feel the temporary comfort of feeling like you might. Here's the honest truth about why this is hard. The end-state fantasy doesn't feel like a fantasy. It feels like a plan. The version of you who does yoga and speaks French and meal preps every Sunday feels reachable in the moment of purchase in a way that requires the thing you're about to buy. And there's something genuinely sad about giving that up, about setting aside the idea that buying the thing will help you become the person. It requires admitting, at least a little, that becoming the person requires something harder than a purchase. It requires actually doing the thing, repeatedly, in real life, on the Tuesdays when you don't feel like it. But here's what that honesty also gives you. Every dollar you don't spend on an identity you're not actually going to inhabit is a dollar you can direct toward something real. Not toward self-punishment or restriction, toward actual choices. Things you actually do. Experiences you actually have. The financial foundation that gives you actual options. That's what building looks like instead of chasing. Not spending less on things, spending more accurately on things that match who you actually are right now, and less on things that only match who you imagine yourself becoming. The closet full of unused things isn't evidence that you're bad with money. It's evidence that you're human, that you have real aspirations, and that you've been sold a shortcut for reaching them that doesn't actually work. Understanding that shortcut clearly is how you stop taking it. If this shifted something for you, subscribe. Every week, we get into the psychology behind why we make the financial decisions we do. And drop a comment. What's the purchase you made with the most genuine excitement that you've never actually used? I'd genuinely love to hear it.